I'm David Pace. I'm a retired professor from the university, from Indiana University. And I am very involved with teaching, and I am part of an international community of people who are working on trying to help students learn.
Okay. My subject in the next few years will be diversity and teaching in universities,
Yes.
and the challenge was connected with this subject. Can I ask you something about a historical overview, if you can I describe it? What kind of diversity, from your perspective in history, can you describe?
Okay, well, there are of course so many in the context of the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, racial diversity is the most famous, but what we had to deal with the most, but there's so many other kinds of diversity within the class. In the past, education was aimed at finding a small group of people who were in the right communities and had the right skills and passing them on and getting rid of the rest.
May I interrupt
Yes.
you, please? What do you mean by right communities and right education?
Well, from the point of view of the institution, those that had the money, the influence,
Okay,
and
money.
the power. And that now we're in a society in which we need to have most of the population educated. And it's very, very important to learn how to teach in ways we didn't used to know how to teach.
Okay, if I say diversity in context of teaching, it's a challenge one. Not only for the society, for the universities, but also, of course, for the teachers.
That's
How
right.
can you help me?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do to really get to students is to find out where they're having trouble, where the problem areas are precisely, and then to define what it is that somebody has to do to succeed at that spot. So we have what we call bottlenecks, but places where students are stuck, some students are stuck in the learning. In the past, we've just rejected them and said, well, they're not good students. The society can't afford that anymore, and it's a terrible thing to do to the students themselves. So we have to find ways to help students around these problem areas, these obstacles to learning that are there in order to allow more people into the world of higher education.
You said obstacles. If there are two obstacles, one of them, the language.
That's right.
I don't want to focus on the language. I would like to make another aspect, namely the so-called intercultural communication.
Yes.
What did you understand, or what do you understand under this obstacle?
Yes. Well, there's sort of two basic problems. There's the fact that some students are pre-educated in the sense that they've had advantages along the way and they've had the opportunity to be taught this before. Other students haven't. And so in itself, that is a problem, those two populations. How do we help the people who have not had the advantages, who've been disadvantaged in education? But then there's the second problem, that people coming from various communities have different ways of acting and operating in the world. And students who are not parts of the traditional college population have special problems relating to that culture. So we have
So one special problem which I consider here, what I could consider in Germany, is that we in Germany are so-called traditional conservative society, and one major problem is to recognize the other, what we call the other, like Michel Foucault said, the other.
Right.
You make the other not one from your society, and this is one of the major problems. How can diversity aspects from the USA or we in German provide from this? Can we a win-win situation?
There's one thing I feel very good about my country. There are many things I don't. But there's been an effort over the last 30 years systematically to develop ways to communicate across cultural differences and to treat cultural differences as a positive thing, as an advantage, not as something to be ignored or rejected. And so there's been a great deal of cultural work about the fact that encountering somebody that's not like you is an opportunity to learn, is an opportunity to gain, rather than something that's a problem. And so a lot of it on the level of textbooks, on the level of popular culture, television programs, etc., have worked, people have worked very hard to try to get past these limitations. And I think we have a lot more work to do. There's no question about it. But I think students now arrive in college with a more open mind in the United States than they used to, more willingness to deal with somebody who's not like them.
I think we in Germany making progress in this direction. But I'm also not only optimist, I'm looking forward to learn from the US experience. The last question will be, if you give me now a recommendation, how should I as a teacher deal with the most difficult people who can I maybe describe them as a very traditional conservative, and they don't give you space to explain your meaning. How you deal with this?
That's a hard question. Think for a minute. There's some people we're not going to reach. We're going to wait until they pass on to another place. But there are a lot of people who are reachable in various ways. Certainly democracies have at the very core of the notion of democracy itself inclusion. And citizenship is the notion of citizenship itself involves a notion of reaching out and making contact and treating everybody as important in a certain way. And so these are important things in the nature of democracy. So you can, if people are committed at all to democracy, you can point out the contradiction between the notion of exclusion and the notion of the vital importance of all individuals that lies at the core of democracy. So I think that's a piece of it. Certainly in the United States, the Declaration of Independence is a terribly important document because it's part of the national consciousness.
Yeah.
And it says all men are created equal. And
I have a dream.
And so you can, right, and we played with that idea of now for more than 2 centuries.
Yeah.
So there are traditions, and there are traditions in Germany too, which are relevant to this. So find the parts of the traditions that open people up to new things. I mean, you've got Lessing, for example. I mean, what better example could you have of someone trying to deal with the idea of cultural difference than his work, you know, and that's well over 2 centuries ago. It's a part of the German tradition which has come in and out of focus, but it's there.